On a man-made lake in eastern Montana, the water keeps pulling back from boat ramps that were built to sit deep underwater. 1,000 miles downstream, near St. Louis, the same river is still moving, still carrying barges on schedule, every single day. Same river, same name, two completely different stories. The Missouri is the longest river in America, 2,341 miles of it, and in 2026, it is being run as two separate systems by the people who control its dams. So how does one river end up starved at the top and steady at the bottom at the same time? Start with how big this river really is. The Missouri begins in the Rocky Mountains of Montana at a place called Three Forks, and it runs east and south until it joins the Mississippi just north of St. Louis. Along the way, it drains 1 out of every 6 acres of the lower 48 states. Its basin covers parts of 10 states and reaches up into 2 parts of Canada. More than 500,000 square miles of land send their water toward this one channel. Combine it with the lower Mississippi, and you get the 4th longest river system in the world. And right now, most of that land is dry. 74% of the Missouri Basin is in drought. The dry zone is stacked at the top, in Montana and the Dakotas, exactly where the river is born. This year, the spring melt in the upper river came in at about half of what it should be. In April, the water flowing into the system was only 51% of normal. The agency that runs the dams kept changing its forecast for the year, and the number kept sliding the wrong way. In January, they expected runoff near 96% of normal. In February, they dropped it to 80%. A wetter March pulled it back up to 91% and gave everyone a little hope. Then, spring simply did not arrive the way it was supposed to, and by May, they had cut the number all the way down to 67%. The headlines call this a drought. A drought is something that comes and then goes. What is happening to the Missouri is not just a dry spell. It is a slow split, and the people in charge are making it happen on purpose, one release at a time. But this story does not start with this year's dry weather. It starts in 1944 with a promise. Back then, the Missouri was a wild river. It flooded almost every spring, and it shrank to a trickle in late summer. In 1944, Congress approved a plan to tame it for good. The plan was called Pick-Sloan, and at its heart, it was a deal between two halves of the country. The upper basin, the dry high plains of Montana and the Dakotas, would give up land. Whole river valleys would be flooded to build giant man-made lakes. In return, the lower basin, the farm country of Nebraska, Kansas, Iowa, and Missouri, would get a river that no longer flooded and a channel deep enough to float barges year after year. To make it work, the Army Corps built a chain of 6 huge dams across the main river. Fort Peck in Montana, Garrison in North Dakota, which holds back Lake Sakakawea, Oahe, Big Bend, and Fort Randall in South Dakota, and Gavin's Point, the last one in the chain, sitting right on the line between South Dakota and Nebraska. The cost of that deal was not shared evenly. The water rose behind those upstream dams and swallowed the best land in the region, the green valleys along the river where people had lived for generations. Garrison Dam alone flooded about 152,000 acres of the Fort Berthold Reservation, the home of the Mandan, Hidatsa, and Arikara Nation. Families were forced to leave the valleys where they farmed and move up onto dry bluffs. Oahe Dam did the same thing downstream, flooding the low farmland on the Standing Rock and Cheyenne River reservations. The upper basin paid in land and homes, so the lower basin could have a calm working river. There was a quieter problem baked into the plan. The whole system was built around the way the river acted in the middle of the last century. The water levels engineers measured back when the dams were going up. The climate Montana and the Dakotas have now runs hotter and drier than that, and the droughts keep coming closer together. So the saved up water the system was built to lean on has become harder to fill back up than it used to be. By 1967, the whole system was full. Barges had started running on the lower river back in 1953. For the first time in its history, the wild Missouri was under control. 6 lakes, 1 river, 8 different jobs to do at once, from stopping floods to making power to keeping cities and barges supplied. For a while, things actually worked the way they were drawn up. That did not last. The river has gone through long, dry stretches before. From 1987 to 1992, 6 dry years in a row pulled the lakes down hard. Then from 2000 to 2007, 8 straight dry years dropped the whole system to some of the lowest levels it had ever seen. Both times, the water eventually came back. Both times, people decided the system had passed its test and moved on. Now look at this year. The winter snow on the northern plains came in thin. The snow up in the Rockies, the deep snow that feeds the very top of the river, was below normal too. In February, a stretch of warm weather melted what little plains snow there was, far too early to do any good. By April, the water flowing in had dropped to about half of normal, and the forecast for the whole year fell again by another 700,000 acre-feet in a single month. John Remus, Chief of the United States Army Corps of Engineers, Missouri River Basin Water Management Division, said it plainly. He said dry conditions cover 74% of the basin, and that the drought is expected to hold through July, with more of it likely to spread across Montana and South Dakota. Doug Cluck, a government climate scientist who updated the Corps on its monthly call, said the next 3 months are not expected to look any different. No big swing toward wet, no relief on the horizon, just more of the same. You can read the worry in how much water they plan to let out. The water let out of Fort Peck Dam in Montana was nudged up from 5,000 to 7,000 cubic feet per second in the middle of May, and only as high as 8,000 by July. The Corps raised Garrison Dam from 14,000 to 18,000 and then held it flat through the summer. These are careful, stingy numbers. The Corps is letting out just enough and not a drop more, because it does not know when the next good year is coming. And the timing of where all that dryness landed could not have been worse. It landed mostly upstream. The bottom of the river, the part that grows the crops and floats the barges, has been getting rain at the right times. The top of the river, the part that fills the lakes, has not. Now, picture the whole length of it. The Missouri leaves the mountains in Montana and crosses the high plains. It fills Fort Peck Lake, then Lake Sakakawea, then Lake Oahe, dropping through one lake after another, like water moving down a staircase of pools. It runs past Bismarck, North Dakota, and Pierre, South Dakota. At Sioux City, Iowa, the dams end and the open river begins. From there, it flows free, past Omaha, past Kansas City, all the way to St. Louis. Here is the fault line. The upper river, above Sioux City, lives mostly on snow, Rocky Mountain snow in the spring, plain snow in the winter. The lower river, below Sioux City, lives on rain and on big side rivers like the Platte and the Kansas that pour in along the way. So, when the snow fails but the rain still comes, the river splits in two. The top goes dry, the bottom stays wet, and the only thing tying the two halves together is one choice, made every single day, about how much water to let out of that last dam. This is where the staircase of pools matters most. In a normal year, melting snow pours into the top pool, and the whole staircase stays full from top to bottom. But this year, the top of the staircase is barely getting filled, so the people who run the dams face one hard choice. To keep water flowing out the bottom, where the cities and the barges are, they have to pull it down from the pools in the middle. That is exactly what they are doing. They are holding the upper lakes back to save what little they have, while still letting water out of the bottom dam to keep the lower river alive. Think about what that means. The water keeping the barges floating near St. Louis is partly water taken out of the lakes in Montana and the Dakotas. One half of the river is being spent to keep the other half running. The river you see in St. Louis looks almost normal. The river trapped behind the dams upstream is quietly shrinking to pay for it. That is the part the public sees. Behind the scenes, the numbers are tighter than they look. The whole system is holding about 49 million acre-feet of water right now. That is nearly 7 million acre-feet below the amount the Corps likes to keep saved up for a dry year. An acre-foot is enough water to cover an acre of land 1 foot deep, about enough to supply 2 average homes for a year. The system is short by millions of them. And the lake levels you read about are not the full picture. The bigger problem is what the split does to everything built on top of each half of the river. If you are finding this useful, subscribe. We cover water systems, droughts, and the systems holding this country together every week, with the full picture you need to actually follow what is going on. While the upper lakes were dropping, something else was happening to the power supply. The same 6 dams that store the water also make electricity. In a normal year, the dam's power plants make about 9.3 billion kilowatt hours. This year, they are expected to make only about 7.3 billion. That is a steep fall, and it lands hardest on the small towns and farm groups across the northern plains that count on cheap dam power. Less water spinning the machines inside the dams means less electricity, which means higher bills for the people who can least afford them. The damage runs in order, from the top of the river down. First, the shoreline. At Fort Peck Lake in Montana and Lake Sakakawea in North Dakota, the water has pulled so far back that boat ramps now end in dry dirt. The Corps has had to survey those ramps and pay to extend them just so people can still reach the water. The lakeside towns that live on summer fishing and boating watch their season shrink along with the shoreline. Every foot the lake drops is another row of docks left standing over nothing, and another stretch of a small town summer that simply does not happen. These lakes are the marinas, the bait shops, the boat rentals, and the campgrounds that whole counties depend on. Second, the people who drink straight from these lakes. Several tribal nations sit right on these lakes and pull their drinking water directly out of them. The Standing Rock and Cheyenne River reservations sit on Lake Oahe. The Mandan, Hidatsa, and Arikara Nation sits on Lake Sakakawea. Their water pipes were built for a full lake. In past droughts, the falling water has come close to leaving those pipes high and dry, forcing emergency fixes. A shrinking lake puts that same fear right back on the table for the very people who gave up their land to build it. In a few months, if the lake keeps dropping, those people will understand exactly what this year really meant. Third, the power, which we just walked through. Spreading higher costs across the plains every month, the dams fall short on power. Fourth, the barges. Below the last dam, the river is supposed to stay deep enough for cargo boats. The Corps keeps it that way by releasing water from Gavins Point Dam. This year, those releases are running about 5,500 cubic feet per second below full service. The barge season still opened on the 1st of April, but at reduced service. The shipping channel runs from Sioux City, Iowa, the farthest point upstream that barges can reach, down about 760 miles to the mouth near St. Louis. These boats push grain, fertilizer, sand, and heavy farm and building supplies up and down that channel all season long. And every foot of depth in it depends on a dam, hundreds of miles upstream, choosing to let go of water that the upper basin badly wants to keep. The lower river floats because the upper river is told to wait. There is a squeeze in the middle too. The towns that sit just below the dams, places like Yankton, South Dakota, live on whatever the Corps decides to release. When the winter water let out of Gavins Point drops to its lowest setting of 12,000 cubic feet per second, the river below it runs low and cold and narrow, and the people who fish it and pump from it feel the dial being turned by hand. Fifth, the country. The lower Missouri empties into the Mississippi, which carries the grain of the middle of the country to the rest of the world. The cities strung along the lower river, Omaha, Kansas City, and St. Louis, all drink from it. This is not a local problem dressed up as a national one. A river that drains 1/6 of the United States cannot break in half quietly. And somehow it gets worse, because the split is not a one-time event. It is a pattern, and the pattern keeps coming back faster. Look again at that 8-year drought from 2000 to 2007. Back then, the lakes fell for years before they finally filled back up. The lesson almost everyone took from it was simple. Store enough water and you can ride out almost anything. That belief is baked into the whole Pick-Sloan system. Fill the giant lakes in the wet years, lean on them in the dry years, and the river keeps all 8 of its promises. But the wet years are not filling the top of the staircase the way they used to. The mountain snow keeps arriving late and thin. Warm springs melt it too fast, or turn it into rain that runs off before the lakes can catch it. The saved-up water the whole system was built to lean on is not being filled back up. That is the quiet shift hiding inside the headlines. The first long droughts, in the late 1980s and the early 2000s, were treated as rare emergencies, once-in-a-lifetime events. But the dry years keep stacking closer together now, and each comeback looks a little weaker than the last. The part of the upper basin above Gavins Point Dam is headed for closer to 15.5 million acre-feet of water this year, about 67% of normal. About a third of the river's water for the whole year is just not showing up. You would think someone would have sounded the alarm louder. Plenty of people have. The forecasts have been sliding for months, right out in the open, and the weather experts on the monthly calls keep saying things are not about to change. And if that sounds bad, the two halves of the river do not even heal at the same speed. The lower basin can bounce back in a single rainy season because rain falls fast and the side rivers fill back up fast. The upper basin cannot. It depends on years of snow stacking up in the mountains and on the plains. Once those lakes are drained low, it can take many good winters in a row to bring them back. One half of the river comes back in weeks. The other half comes back in decades, if it ever comes back at all. The Corps has months, not years, of spare water left in the upper basin if this dry pattern holds. And the clock on the next melt season has already started ticking. So the questions pile up. How long can the people running these dams keep the bottom of the river full while the top runs dry? What happens to the tribal nations whose water pipes were never built for a lake this low? And if the mountain snow keeps showing up late and thin, Does the upper Missouri ever really fill again, or does the split just quietly become the new normal? Nobody can answer that yet. The forecasts only run a few months out, and this year the changes have nearly all gone one way, down. For now, the river keeps doing two things at once. Near St. Louis, the water still rolls past on schedule, deep enough for the barges, looking for all the world like nothing is wrong. 1,000 miles upstream, on a man-made lake in eastern Montana, the waterline keeps creeping away from the land, leaving a wider band of dry, cracked shore every week, and the boat ramps keep reaching down toward water that is no longer there. Same river, same name. One half kept alive on purpose, the other half quietly let go.